This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you so much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, March the 27th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, and Fonz King. He's still in the producer's chair. You'll be speaking with Fonz when you pick up the phone to give us a shout and in the queue and on the air. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So yesterday we had a call from a fellow named Jack talking about the fact that wishing good luck to Team Guizhou as they get set to compete in the World Championships and wondering why there wasn't more focus on Team Rachel Homan winning the World Championships this past weekend. Another curling update. Congratulations, go get him to the Newfoundland and Labrador representative rink out at the mixed curling wheelchair championships out in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. Newfoundland and Labrador 4-0 at the top of the table, tied with Ontario, and they got Saskatchewan later, or no, tied with Saskatchewan. They got Ontario later today. And some developing news here in the ECHL and the Newfoundland Growlers. The story is, and I'll try to get confirmation as soon as possible, that as of the 2nd of April, the league is going to take over operations of the Growlers and a team also owned by Deacon Sports and Entertainment, the Trois Rivières Lyon. So what that means for the future of the Growlers remains to be seen, but if you're a Growlers fan, we'll keep an eye on that particular story and see what we can get to you. Newhook, triumphant return to Colorado where he won a Stanley Cup. They actually had a video tribute for Alex Newhook last night in Colorado as the Canadians got set to take on the Avalanche, who have been blistering hot. Great video tribute, got a standing ovation, pretty cool stuff. Goes on to get an assist in the winning goal as the Habs beat the Avalanche 2-1 in Colorado. All right, so I don't know what you're like when you watch sports. You know, maybe I'm a bit numb to it now, but all the betting advertisements that are part of watching any pro sports, updated to-the-minute opportunities to bet on X, Y, and Z. Some of the big stories now regarding gambling. For starters, there's hundreds of billions of dollars bet on professional sports in North America alone. In the United States last year, there was somewhere in the neighborhood of $130 billion was the most accurate number I could find. You see what's going on in the province of Ontario. The betting stats are unreal. But then comes the concept of the manipulation of the outcomes because of the betting. We saw earlier this year, Ottawa Senators forward Shane Pinto suspended for 41 games for his gambling. And now one of the biggest sports stars in the world, Shohei Ohtani, who plays for the Los Angeles Dodgers after signing a 10-year, $700 million contract. The story was that he had paid some $4.2 million on behalf of his interpreter to settle up his gambling debts. Ohtani says that's not true. He said it's simply the interpreter stole $4.2 million for him. So the story is not over. People will wonder whether or not it was a theft, or Ohtani was covering his interpreter's bookie owings, or his interpreter was betting on his behalf. Ohtani says it's not true. But then you go down a little further, and this guy's kind of an insignificant NBA player. His name is Jonte Porter. He plays for the Toronto Raptors. So there's something called a proposition bet. You can bet on the most innocuous things, like the over-under with how many points he's going to get. And he doesn't contribute very much. He averaged around 4 points and a couple of assists and a couple of rebounds. In 2 games in particular, he took himself out of the game. And the bets were coming in heavy on the under. And it was whether or not he scored more than, I think it was 4 points. So he took himself out of the game twice. And the bets were huge on it. And the implication is Porter is intimately involved in fixing those prop bets. So as much as people enjoy throwing down a couple of quid on a game, sports and gambling is absolutely out of control. All right, here we go. Heading into the weekend where people would be wanting to share some chocolate with their friends and family and maybe some Easter egg hunts. Have you seen the numbers for the cost of cocoa? Well, it tripled over the last 12 months. $10,000 per metric ton. 10,000 American per metric ton. So when you go to buy some chocolate here at the last minute, beware. Okay, let's get going here. Let's get into the fishery again. So we know the forage fish, one of the linchpin for certainly the strength of the cod stock would be capelin. DFO yesterday, talking through the researcher Paul Regler, said the cod stocks remain relatively stable and are still in the cautious zone, but the potential fallback in the critical zone is high. Why? Because of the depleted capelin stock. So it collapsed back in 1991. It still remains at only 10% of the pre-collapse abundance. Obviously, this is a big deal. Now, there was a pretty contentious meeting last week where members of the FFAW and processors got up and walked out, where there were other advocacy groups there calling for a moratorium on the capelin stock. I don't have the answers here, but when we know that the cod really, truly do need an abundance of capelin, and those are not fitting hand in glove at this moment in time, I'll leave it up to DFO, the scientists, and the industry itself, but that is a distinct warning that I think people should and could be paying attention to. In addition to that, with the most recently brokered deal in the fishery, it's going to be fascinating to see what the actual legal document comes out looking like. Because if you listen to the Association for Seafood Producers versus maybe John Efford Jr. or the union, there are two pretty distinctly different stories and potential outcomes. We'll all find out at the same time whether or not any of this works, the concept of outside buyers in particular. But those stories regarding capelin and cod really need to be a bit more of the part of the conversation. And you think about it, like mackerel. There were a couple of years of moratorium on the mackerel. Why? Because it was also a foraged fish. The interesting contrast between the capelin and the mackerel is capelin are pretty much a stock that's measured in just our waters, whereas mackerel is formally defined as a shared stock. Canada, moratorium, the United States kept fishing, albeit at lower levels of mackerel, but there you go, you want to take it on. From any angle, we can do exactly that. Just 1 second, sip of coffee. Okay. Switching gears, back into healthcare. This story just adds to the chaos and confusion and frustrations when we talk about the nursing industry, the nursing profession. So I don't know who was told what when, but now Yvette Coffey, the president of the Registered Nurses Union, say that they have been recently told that when a nurse leaves the travel nurse company and wants to come back to the public sector, they have to wait 12 months. Now, I don't know if the nurses who left the public sector were told on their way out to join a travel agency that here's the case. If you want to come back, it'll take 12 months. Apparently, they didn't know, which is also interesting because I asked that very question of Minister Osborne on this program not that long ago. We were talking about the concept of non-competes. Maybe put that warning into the publicly hired registered nurse that if you're considering leaving, then it's going to take 12 months before you can get rehired. But apparently the union didn't know. And if that's the case, you would imagine many of the travel nurses didn't know. Now, on top of the confusion and the frustration, add to it that inside the most recent collective bargaining, nurses have not been paid their negotiated premiums as of yet. And the government says it takes time to sift through the paperwork, but that's not the union's fault, that's the government's fault. But on this one, so if we have still gaps and shortages inside the registered nurses, and I understand why the government would put something like that in place in an effort to make nurses aware that you're possibly facing a year of unemployment. But what's going to be the case here? People who leave the travel nursing agency, they're not going to sit on their hands for 12 months, right? So what's the opportunity for them? Stick with being a travel nurse, further complicating the system, or even worse, leave the profession, or even worse than that, go to be a registered nurse in another province. So while it kind of probably made sense conceptually when the government crafted this policy, in reality, it's not going to help the system. So whether or not Ms. Coffey would like to call, or anyone who's a travel nurse and or a registered nurse and has seen the confusion on the floor, but that is not great. So the nurses union are up in arms, understandably so, but it is kind of strange that they weren't told, so they could make their members aware that if you're considering leaving, here's the reality after you want to rejoin the public ranks. But apparently 12 months, and they didn't know, even though we've had that discussion right here on this program. All right, a little bit outside things we talk about a lot, but let's talk about the RCMP. So there's actually a caller in the queue who wants to talk about drugs and crime. Excellent. So after they had the Mass Casualty Commission report revealed, that's of course about the mass casualty episode in Nova Scotia. Tragic and horrifying. So provincial leaders and territorial leaders are waiting for some guidance about what the future of the RCMP looks like here in this country. So there's a lot to it. One thing is funding. The provinces pay 70% of the funding for the RCMP, and the federal government picks up the rest. And of course, the RCMP is involved in all sorts of different areas. It's not just policing like you think about it. They're talking about national intelligence, money laundering, things that might not necessarily be in the crosshairs or the bailiwick of law enforcement agencies like the RNC. So there's also some thought that the RCMP, when we try to figure out what their new mandate is and the presence they will have and who's going to fund them, there's a thought of the possibility of the RCMP simply being a national police force. Consequently, not boots on the ground like we currently see in the detachments around the country. Now, we know we have huge vacancies in the RCMP, glaring vacancies here in this province regarding the RCMP presence, but the thought is if they become a national police force only would mean they operate something like akin to the FBI. So while we've seen those absences of RCMP officers and the need for the RNC to expand their geographical jurisdiction, and yes, there's some more money in the budget to hire more RNC officers, and yes, there's more money in the budget to hire more correctional officers, what's taking the government so long? I mean, Dominic LeBlanc, the Minister of Public Safety, he's had this file in his hand and on his desk. And while we all worry about spikes in crime and whether it be jail, not bail, and all those political slogans we see flicked around, this is pretty important stuff. So for Minister Hogan or other justice ministers across the country, it's been a long time trying to figure it out because provinces need to know. The contract with the RCMP runs out in 2032, which feels like a long way away, but it's not. Because if provinces have to get their ducks in a row and organise and fund and craft what would be a police agency that would replace the RCMP presence, that's going to take some time and money and some time and planning. So the RCMP update, we need to see it as soon as possible. And sticking with that, in the most recent budget, there is indeed money on top of hiring correctional officers for some renovations at Her Majesty's Penitentiary and the dungeon that it is on Lakeside. So $15 million over 2 years, $8 million this year. New spaces for recreation, programming. And in the programming front, it sounds like they're going to put trailers on site for some of the programs, which are important, because on top of punishment, a little bit of rehabilitation is good for all of us as well. Also improved access for visitation. And that's more than simply getting to see their family. And many prisoners down there haven't seen their family in months, whether it be with black mold or the shortage of correctional officers and a variety of things that have kept that be the reality. But they've also had a problem seeing their lawyers. So whether or not you think we should spend any more money to aid inmates at Her Majesty's, there's a possibility that when things potentially go sideways in the lack of meeting face-to-face between lawyers and prisoners, or lawyers and inmates, or those on remand, that could turn itself into a big price tag that would mean you're going to have to foot a bill on if it ever came to a class action or some sort of civil lawsuit. So a bit of money for the HMP, you want to take it on. Let's go. Okay. Now, I'm not sure why, but there was many people yesterday after our conversation with the president of the NLTA downplaying the concerns brought forward by Trent Langton regarding violence. Let's start with how we define violence. And it's a fair question to be asked. There's a long road between your mother dresses you funny and a punch in the face, right? But the incidence of violence in schools is something that should concern us all because it has wide-reaching impact, regardless of if you have a child in school or not. So, yes, if we're talking about mean words and the lack of coping skills and or the so-called fragility of young people today and or the new world we live in, the fact of the matter is, it's one thing for me in my mid-50s to talk about just toughen up, be able to take the unkind words. But I think if we step back and think about it through the eyes of an 8-year-old, some of these words can indeed impact their spirit, their safety, their willingness, and want to go to school. So there's a little bit more to it than simply thinking that because of participation medals that we've just created a society that are mollycoddled and unable to put up with anything. Some of that's true. But we have to take it serious anyway. Here's some of the numbers that are reported. They're looking at a projected 40% increase in violence in schools this year compared with last year. 20 reported incidents per day 5 years ago, 29 per day reported in the first 3 months of this school year. Okay. So they also go on to break it down to things where it is absolutely a case of violence that needs to be reported. 3,900 violent incidents is the projection. 30 warranting calls to police. That's enough for us to all be worried about what's happening here. Then you look at some of the stressors that might be in play. And this is a societal issue, and not necessarily inside the walls of the school. Whether people are living in poverty, homelessness, parents who are involved in the legal system, mental health issues, backlog in mental health, all those things that absolutely do creep into the classroom and has a widespread impact. We can expand that to the inclusive model of education, whether or not that's further complicating issues, but some of these things have led directly to children not wanting to go to school because of the air or the atmosphere. There's national reports out there now about absenteeism. So don't take it from me, because we've heard from the Child and Youth Advocate here with the chronic absenteeism and what it means. If you miss a month of school, or you miss 10% of the school year, in grade 6, 75% of those children never graduate high school. So it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal. Now we look at absentee rates across the country, and they have been further complicated by the pandemic. It's that disconnect from school that's hard to get back. Whether the children wake up and say, not feeling great, I'll just check in with Google Classroom. Consequently, across the board, across the country, absenteeism rates are up. Let's look at some of the concerning numbers here in this province, because we know we have a problem here. Here's the quote from the report, the exclusive Canadian data. And like I said, every jurisdiction, they have a problem with absenteeism. In Newfoundland and Labrador, 2/3 of secondary school students were chronically absent in 22-23. Up from just under half in 2018-19. 2/3 of secondary school students are chronically absent in 22-23. These are according to figures from the Provincial Department of Education. For elementary students, the rate more than doubled, from 23 to 50% over the same period. So as much as, there's so many cost of living issues and inflation and the price of groceries, we've got a trend that is absolutely worrisome inside the schooling system. Whether you look at the scores of math, science, and reading, which I think is the number one headline in the country, and it should be in this province, these stories have to be attended to. So whether the department is working with the NLTA and other departments inside the government to understand why you're absent, what we can do about it, what supports are required in school, whether it be for learning and or public safety. These are just massive issues. Imagine, I'll read it one more time. 2/3 of secondary school students chronically absent in 22-23, up from just under half in 18-19. Elementary students, the rate more than doubled, from 23 to 50% over the same period. We should talk about that. Maybe you want to this morning. All right. One more in the fishery I forgot to mention. The protesters and the union were asking for a 1-week delay in the crab fishery, which was supposed to start in about a week. DFO initially resisted, but now we're going to accommodate that to allow for some of the deal that has been brokered in concept to be actually ironed out and legalized on a document. So we can take that on. And also, less than 2 weeks away from April 9th, where the government is going to give us some idea of what the future of World Energy GH2's proposal on the Port of Port Peninsula looks like. We all understand the implications of April 1st, not just in April Fool's Day, but carbon tax, MP raises, all those things. If you want to bring them forward, happy to do it. How are we doing on the phone there, Fons? Very quick one before we get to you. I want to say happy birthday to Kason Pierce. Got a note from the family this morning asking me to do that, and I'm happy to do it. Hopefully you have yourself a terrific birthday, Kason Pierce. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Michael's going to kick us off with drugs and crime. There's also a caller there talk about the fishery. Don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Bigland FM radio network.
Welcome back to the program. Let's begin on the top of the board. Line number 1. Caller, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Patty?
Yeah.
I'm calling about the fishery. I'm an administrator at a fish plant for the last 10 years, and I've been listening to all the discussions that they're having right now, and I'm just curious about something, because when this all started, we've been applying for those crab licenses and different species for a long time, but we always get turned down. So when this all started, we decided, well, maybe we should put in another application for a license for crab and different other species. But when I started doing the application, there's like $2,500 fee. You have to advertise in a major and local newspaper for a couple of weeks, and then you have to go before the board and probably have to wait a year and all this. And I said to the boss, I said, this seems rather stupid, because right now Outside buyers, it seems like, a one-page application they're talking about, no discrimination, full access to all species, no minimum processing requirements, and so on and so on. And I said, is this being offered automatically to the plant owners in Newfoundland as well? Or do we still have to do it applications? Because that seems really stupid to me. Have you heard anything on this at all?
I don't know. I wish I had an answer to that, but it's an excellent question. Just for my own clarity, just in Cole's notes, just give me that one more time so I can write it down and get an answer. So so
right now we have a plant, and our plant workers right now are kind of getting worried about their job. Right now we have, a steady flow of work for our workers. But if this goes through, they could lose some work, and we don't have any foreign workers or anything. It's all local plant workers.
Okay.
And, if we were given all those extra species that's being offered to the outside buyers, then we could probably offer more work for our plant workers right now in case they lose it on the other end. If people's, fisheries or the fishers start, sending outside buyers.
Yeah, there's been no mention.
We've been applying for those species, but we always get turned down. So here we are. We're starting an application to apply, and it seems like rather stupid to have to go through all this when it's just being offered to outside buyers. So are we going to be included in this, one-page application, no discrimination, full access to all species, no minimum processing requirements, and everything the same as the outside buyers? Because it seems really discriminatory to me that they could get all this and we're still here filling out applications.
It's an excellent question. There hasn't been any mention. Now, the protesters were also asking for an expanded capacity on the processing side. Now, that was always fairly vague to me. There was mostly referring to crab, for instance, and removing of the caps. The plants like St. Mary's is always part of that conversation. But I don't know the answer to that question. And,
where they're starting to do up the paperwork on all this and kind of setting this thing in stone, we would like to have this included in the documents that they're writing up, because it's probably too late to talk about it after it's all said and done. So I know you probably have fisheries listening in that may know the answer, may not know, but we need to know the answer. I got an application sitting on my desk that I'm not willing to send out right now because it just don't seem that is necessary. Because we should have the same opportunity offered to us that is offered to the outside buyers.
I'll see if I can get an answer, because, the application to have a multi-species plant is vastly different than some of the smaller plants that just do whatever, whether it be crab and shrimp, for instance. So I'll get an answer to that, because that's an interesting question. I don't know how it's been factored in, but I think the reason for that, in large part, has been because the protesters, the harvesters, the union, they've been driving the conversation. And we know that the FFAW are trying to serve two masters, as they say, when they represent harvesters and plant workers, but the harvesters themselves inside the protests were only really talking about things that directly impacted them. They were talking about the processing side, trying to expand capacity and removing caps and that kind of stuff, but that was really about their ability to sell, whether it be cod at the end of the crab season or what have you. So let me see if I can get something figured out on that front. I'll go to
we don't have any problem with what the harvesters are trying to do. It's just that we feel that we should be giving the same opportunity to the owners in Newfoundland should be offered the same opportunity as they're giving to the outside buyers. That's all we're saying. Why not?
Understood. Let me get an answer.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I appreciate the call.
I'll be listening in. Okay.
Thanks. Bye-bye. That's interesting. Now, I would imagine that it's going to be the same process in the future for the local processors when it comes to applications for different species, but we'll get an answer to that one. Let's go to line number 2. Michael, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Paddy. Thanks for taking my call and letting me speak on your line today.
No problem.
Sir, our PC leader, Tony Wakeham, is that his name?
It is.
I think, sir, he should call immediate House of Assembly and get everybody together and try to get John Hogan and Andrew Fleury. More John Hogan. He should resign, sir. It should be an automatic resign of the Hogan ministry. And I'll tell you why, sir.
Why?
There's an epidemic in Newfoundland. We're finding bodies and young girls dying on the street of overdoses. Young children, young men. They're our brothers. They're our sisters. And we got HM Penitentiary. Now they're going to put a Band-Aid on the wound. They're going to give us $50 million to put a Band-Aid on it. When we're getting people with an addiction from Marystown right into St. John's that are committing crime in the homes, home invasions. The crime rate is so out of hand that the police don't even know how to do it. And I approached these police officers in the Tim Hortons when I was home in Newfoundland. And I brought up about this trap house. And the trap house is where young girls goes in, sells their body, and they get trapped. They can't get out because their men are giving them drugs for sex. They're all over the cities. They're all over the inner city from Marystown into St. John's. And everybody in the inner cities knows from Cowan Avenue to Pennywell Road that these houses exist, where these young girls goes in and out, prostituting. It's all over social media, and nothing is being done. No arrests, no investigations, and these young children that are being found in the neighborhoods of overdosing, nobody wants to speak out because they're an addict, and they got overdosed on fentanyl. So nobody wants to go on open line or the air and say, look, publicly like that, my child was an addict and my child was found dead due to an overdose of fentanyl. And Mr. Hogan, sir, is turning a blind eye. Here we got the fishery, and I don't want to get into talk about the fishery, because if you fool with the fishery and the fishery's money, they will burn down Confederation, as we know from previous when dealing with fishery. And I have nothing to say bad about the fishery, because I lost my friends in a tragic accident to the ocean. So my heart goes out to the fishery. I don't want to debate that. But if you're going to bring in legislation to bring police in, where the fisherman is going to go in and do a negotiation to the government and fight for their rights, they're going to bring in the police. What about the drug dealers that are driving around in our communities, which everybody knows who they are with their new trucks, their new gold chains, their high lifestyles and their homes? They got no record of where they got the money to buy these homes. They got no record of where they got the money. Everybody in the community knows they bought that house from drug dealing. But yet that little girl that just died last night from an overdose of fentanyl, nobody's doing any investigation. When we know down on Cowan Avenue, they find multiple bodies out in front of a house due to overdose death, and nothing is being investigated. And I asked these police officers, I said, how come you're not investigating these overdose deaths in this trap house? He said, Mike, we asked this trap house owner to stop bringing in the prostitutes and the drugs. That's not how you respond to a major crime that's in the process. So John Hogan got to get
Mikey?
in the government.
Yeah, I don't know what Mr. Wakeham has to do with that particular affair, but
Mr. Wakeham is the opposition leader, and he could start speaking up like he did for the fishery men and women.
Yeah, okay. All right, Mike. So, inside that world, you're not wrong. Like, people living in certain neighborhoods, they know the houses where the crack or the drugs are being sold. They know the houses where prostitution is taking place. You're not wrong. I've got one particular listener that sends me emails about this one person and this one house, and I'll leave their neighborhood out of it because I've never been there and I don't know exactly what's going on. But they send me pictures and videos, people coming and going. It's really quite clear what's happening there, and yet they are reporting to me that they get little to no police activity. And then you see other pockets of the city here where they go in and they make some arrests, but the next thing you know, the very people arrested are right back there peddling drugs the very next day. So I don't know what's going on here, but you're not wrong in knowing that neighborhoods, individuals, and I would imagine the police, they know a lot more than we probably know about as, just individual citizens. But why there's more not done, I really don't know. But it's a fair question, because with drugs comes the crime. With crime comes the violence. With the drugs comes overdoses. And we know the overdose numbers are really spiking in this province. So I understand where you're coming from, Mikey.
I know these drug dealers that are famous drug dealers in Newfoundland, because I'm an advocate for mental illness and drug addiction. I'm up here working with the police. I'm working with Toronto Raptors. I got the Toronto Raptors. I got a basketball program up here helping youth. I got youth going to 183 Labour's Union getting training. I'm up here being an advocate for mental illness and drug addiction. But down home, I know these drug dealers are getting busted for dealing drugs. They got the big gold chains, the new cars. They're locked up in HM Penitentiary 2 days later, out in bail in the same trap house, selling the same drugs to the same young women. And nobody's going to jail. I've done 21 years in jail, Paddy, for selling drugs.
Michael, I appreciate you putting it out there this morning, because I try to talk about the impact on public safety with drugs and crime and violence and overdoses, and some people are willing and wanting to talk about, others turn a blind eye. You know, they simply say, well, people make bad decisions, and consequently they have to, lie in the bed or sleep in the bed that they've made, when in fact it's a bigger problem than that. It's a societal issue. It really truly is. The amount of crime.
Thank you for allowing me on your program, and I just hope for the Conservative government, Tony Wakeham, I hope he just grabs onto this and tries to fight for the addict that still suffers.
Appreciate your time, Mike.
Bless you and your listeners.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, let's take a break. I mean, when people are addicted in a death spiral, hooked on drugs, it's not just them and their family that are impacted. I mean, how many times do you think we've seen someone walk into a courtroom down in Atlantic Place and they're charged with whatever, a property crime or a break and enter or an armed robbery or something? How many of those crimes are fueled by drug addiction? I would suggest a lot. People working in the courts say that they estimate somewhere between 80 or somewhere around 80% of people going through the courts are dealing with an addiction issue or a mental health issue. That's a public safety issue. Let's take a break. Margaret, you're next to talk about school bullying. Don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Big Land FM radio network.
Welcome back. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Margaret. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. I was listening to your show yesterday about the bullying going on in school, and he said, how many children are not going to school because they're being bullied? Well, I know that this young girl, must be about 10 years ago, I suppose, she quit in high school because she was being bullied. And that young girl graduated university just within the last few years with honors.
Good for her.
Yeah. But I know another incident, too. A family member, must be about 20 years ago, I suppose, was bullying the children on the bus. So what the mother did, every time that bus pulled up at the end of the day, she'd be there. And she'd say to the bus driver, was he bullying people today? And if he did, he was punished. Right? She took away all his electronics and made him sit in her room. But, that young fella turned out to be a really good man. He got a good job, a beautiful home, and everything. But she took the steps that was needed to correct his behavior, right?
Well, that sounds like pretty solid parenting to me. Now, some parents might be possibly unaware of how their child acts when the parents aren't there watching them, and we can't keep our eyes on our children 24/7, but that's a bit of absenteeism parenting as well, right? Now, there's no handbook, and it's a tough job. It's the toughest job any of us will ever have, is to be a parent and to do whatever constitutes well. But look, some people can recover from being the school bully, and go on to be reasonable people and, professional and have a nice life and, be kind in their adult years. But for some, like I know this one person in particular. He wasn't in my school, but he was a pretty famous hard case. And now as an adult, he's pretty much been ostracized most of his life. He gets no respect from anybody because of the way he treated everyone when they were children. And I know who he is. And he leads a pretty isolated, zero respect offered to him kind of life. So we should be cautious and careful about this issue. And your ultimate question, or your first question about how many children are not in school because of bullying, I would imagine a significant number. And that's a problem.
Yeah, that's right. And I even know of a time when this young girl attacked another girl. Now today she's a social worker.
Yeah, you can rebound. There's no doubt. I mean, some people can be a real complete nuisance until they graduate high school, and then they mature and they see the light and they figure it out.
Yeah. But I think a lot of that, though, children bullying in school is what's going on in the homes. I firmly believe that.
Well, I don't think there's an argument against that. Most everything starts at home. So you can tell a lot about a child by how they're not only parented, but you can also tell an awful lot about a child and what their future holds by who their friends are. Yeah,
that's true, too. And also, Patty, I got a family member that's a school teacher.
Uh-huh.
They've been teaching about 5-6 years. Twice now, children who were in school tried to burn school down. Another day, students walked in school with a gun pointed in teacher's face.
In this province?
Now, it wasn't up to the public, was it?
First I heard of it.
Yep. The horror stories they could tell is not they teach us grade 1. They told me about it one day. In kindergarten, this little kid went wild. You're talking about a 5-year-old, right? The teacher had to take all the kids out of the classroom, and of course get the principal. Tom, she got all the kids in the classroom. This 5-year-old had the classroom wrecked.
I mean, I've heard individual stories, and one area of concern for, I think, many music teachers is what happens inside of their classroom and the lack of support they get. There's this one lady, Rosemary Lawton, out there, has done her thesis on that type of violence. There's a story where a lady had broken ribs because a xylophone got thrown at her. Someone else talking about, what instrument was it? The student went after the teacher with the trumpet or something. I mean, these are pretty crazy stories.
Yeah. This man walked into school one day and attacked the teacher. So after that, they started locking the doors in the school, and they even hired security. There were security in the building the day the kids walked in with the gun.
There was a story a couple of months ago about a weapon, and nobody really knew exactly what that meant, whether it was a knife or a bat or...
Yeah, this happened a few years ago.
Oh, a few years ago. And I'm not aware of that story, to be honest.
Nobody is, because it wasn't out to the public. Right?
Fair enough.
But I tell you, the stuff that goes on in school, even in the, kindergarten and grade 1 and stuff, it's the horror stories teachers could tell you is scary. Right? Like, I hear about it every now and again because, like I said, I got a relative who's a school teacher.
I hear a lot of stories off the record from educators as well. And, I mean, they're loath to come on and tell their own stories. Many of them were spoken to and interviewed as they try to figure out about these incidents of violence. But it's... Anyway, Margaret, it's a troubling story, but it's one worthy of discussion. Would you like to say anything else?
Oh, I was going to talk about the fishery. My husband used to be in the fishery until it stopped. I said, good for them. Stick up for themselves. Like, Paddy, you know it yourself. You go in the store, buy a half a salmon, a fillet, a salmon, little small piece, $20. Right? And here these fishermen are getting, $1 or $2 a pound. And you go in the store and the seafood costs a fortune. So, and I think, it's like I don't know why the government is involved in it. This is like their own business. Like, if I had my own business, I wouldn't want you or anybody else coming and tell me how I run my business, right? Where I can sell my stuff to or whatever.
And they've changed some of the rules with how harvesters are allowed to sell, like direct sale to restaurants or what have you. But there's no real understandable reason why, if I go to the grocery store, the predominant opportunity to buy fish or any fish species, they should be from our waters. I mean, we talk about how great the product is, and yet I go in there and there's product that maybe from Russia or from Greenland or who knows where we should have our shelves stocked entirely with Newfoundland and Labrador seafood.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But like I said, I think they should be allowed to sell their fish whoever they want to. Like any business, you're going to sell to get the most money you can get for it, right? And I mean, you're talking about these jobs. They're going out fishing. I mean, the dangers that they face every day and stuff with the water and that, and the hard work they put in hours and hours catching this fish and stuff. And they should be allowed to sell to who they want, and they should be allowed to get what they want for it. That's what I think. They work hard enough for it. They
do. There's lots of restrictions in the fishery, which has not been in the best interest of anyone working, whether it be on the harvesting or the processing side. And just look where we are. And it's been every year for as long as I've been in this chair. And yet this is the first real proactive move that we've seen. A couple things on the federal front. They removed the old LIFO policy, the last in, first out. But other than that, not a whole lot has changed over the years. Margaret, I'm going to get to the break, but I appreciate your time this morning.
But one quick thing. The thing they're saying, too, is it's going to affect the plant workers. That's why they want to let them sell it anywhere. But I should come back with, it affect the plant workers? I don't think it will, because the people that's buying it will have to up their pay in order to get the product, right?
I don't know how that's going to work, but it just depends how much of the product is bought by someone from outside the province. We won't know how it's going to work until it actually works itself out. So everyone's just taking guesses at this. The ASP is saying, what happens if 20% is sold out of the province? We got fish harvesters saying, including Mr. Effort, that they expect not very much to be sold outside of the province, and consequently the plant workers will not be impacted, and they talk about capacity and all the rest.
The ones that's buying it now, they'll have no choice but to pay whatever the going rate is around other provinces, right?
Fair enough. I appreciate the call, Margaret.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, we can all opine as to what we think is going to happen here. But, I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you look at the numbers, the numbers are You know, the concept of competition is tried and true, right? It's a lot of economics 101. With more competition comes a better price for the raw material. Then, of course, it's the direct impact of the marketplace, because regardless of what the harvesters want or what the processors want, the market rules the roost. You know, there can indeed be a sliding scale like there was last year, and there can be a sliding scale like inside the lobster fishery, where when the market improves, the price improves. But that's going to be the be-all and end-all. We'll see how it works. I'm really anxious to see how the crab season works out. And, of course, yes, I know, it's not just crab. They're talking about every species. And, yes, for the lobster harvesters who also have distinct problems, understood. And that's the second most lucrative fishery in the province. Let's take a break. When we come back, Robin's there to talk about drugs and detox. Don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Big Land FM radio network.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Robin, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Morning.
So I want to talk about more than just drugs and detox. I want to talk about what it takes to get someone to a point where they realize that recovery is a better option than what their current reality is. Okay? And so over the last couple of weeks, I have had many interactions with various different people working in areas that interact with youth in corrections, youth in care, youth leaving care, people at Tent City, people who've been living in shelters for over a year. And so trying to support them so that they get access to housing, so that they can access services. And in many of these situations, the people I work with are already connected to an existing community group. They have a support worker assigned to them that is responsible for finding them housing and all that sort of thing. Unfortunately, every single organization, has housing workers, but no housing to put them in. And so there's actually no housing being created that I am aware of. You know, the government continues to announce all these projects and initiatives, but there's actually there's no physical infrastructure that has resulted, or alternate options for people who require a very low barrier shelter or require the supportive housing. And so in doing that, I want to talk about some of the conversations I've had with police officers. I've had wonderful conversations with police officers, with people who work with these nonprofits, with people who work in government, with people who work in mental health service navigation, with CSSD and child protection. And they are all doing the very best that they can. Well, most of them, the ones I have spoken to. And I get messages every day from child and youth support workers. I get calls in the middle of the night from people who don't have enough to eat, who don't have a place to go where they feel safe to sleep, so that they can actually get sleep, because sleep, it doesn't come naturally to everyone. There's certain conditions that need to be present. But I dropped someone off at the recovery center recently, and it took, I would say, it took about 10 months for them to get to the decision that they wanted to do this for themselves. And what I do, I have a superpower in that I am not paid to do what I do. And there is a real distrust with a lot of people in the system, because the staff working in the system are so overwhelmed. And so now they're getting stressed out. And so they're not able to have that same compassion and empathy for the people they work with as they used to be able to, because they can't effectively do their jobs.
Just before we go any further.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, housing, of course, whether or not people want to start at the high level, whether or not housing is right, and of course it is enshrined in law that it actually is, what that means, I think, is a moving target. Secondly, when people are saying, for instance, I got a note from Mark this morning saying, when Minister Abbott said there'd be no one living in Tent City by Christmas, saying yet there's still people there. Then the thought is from other corners, well, they've been offered options, which include emergency shelters, hotels, or possibly the Comfort Inn. The Comfort Inn is still a mystery to me. It's snuffleupagus, right? Like, we don't even know who's there, what's there, how they're being handled, how many support staff are in place, the ultimate cost of the operations over the course of 3 years, because it's going to be more than $21 million. So what are people actually asking for? And you say there's no meaningful movement taking place here. So there has been ongoing renovations of Newfoundland and Labrador housing units. There's another $50 million in the most recent budget for rental housing development loan program. There's a bunch of monies to move for housing outside the St. John's area, Lab West, the West Coast, the Great Northern Peninsula. So what specifically are you asking that should be done, and what can be done in the short term? Because the housing concern has been growing nationally for decades. We've moved away from housing as a place to lay your head to housing being a measure of economic success. It's a measure of the most equity we'll ever hold in our life for the vast majority of individuals in the country. So what are you saying can be done short term?
Well, the first and most important thing that can be done that is currently causing the most harm to individuals in this situation is the communication by our politicians who are saying that they have been given offers for suitable housing. And that is a lie. No one has been offered a hotel for months. And the last time I got someone into a hotel, it was the captain's quarters in December. And I had to call the Office of Women and Gender and harass their communications officer to get that to happen. So I'm in a situation now where I am supporting someone who is living in a shelter that belongs to one of the organizations. There's people coming and going. There's guns. There's drugs. It's downtown. The place is on wheels 24/7, and there's no one present to offer any oversight. They have a video camera.
Are they attached to a social worker?
Yes. And I have been talking to the social workers and the support workers who work for these organizations. So very few people are attached to a social worker. They are attached to someone, a housing worker, a youth and child worker. So they're attached to someone who's going to connect them to services that operate in silos, that do not address the complex needs. We have 12-year-olds that are living in group homes operated by private companies who employ security guards to take care of them. So they can come and go as they please. I know 12-year-olds in care that are doing drugs that I didn't even know existed in Newfoundland when I was 12. The cops can't go after them. I've been on the Child and Youth Advocate released something today, a news release, because there is zero mental health access for kids. So I've been trying to get a 22-year-old person who grew up interacting in the child protection system, aged out of that. We don't teach them we don't give them a purpose in life. So what we do is we force them to become dependent on us. So all these kids that are aging out of care, they don't know how to take care of themselves. They don't know how to budget. They don't know how to go to the grocery store, buy groceries, bring it home, cook a meal. They don't know how to go out and give out resumes and get a job. Like, they're taken out of school. They're not forced to go to school. There's no one in their life that looks at them and says, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? And so what they do is they have tantrums, huge tantrums. And the way they respond to that is they ignore them. So it is a double-edged sword, what's happening out there right now. And as someone who, prior to 2020, sat at the tables at the executive level, convening working groups with deputy ministers and, the heads of executive directors of organizations, and we were all talking about fixing problems for people who we never consulted. Never. And so yesterday, I was watching a national housing panel led by the National Housing Advocate, who just released a report demanding that the federal government release a action plan on encampments, because it is a horrible refusal of human rights to people who are there.
Shouldn't that be the authority and the jurisdiction of the provinces and municipalities? Do we really want the federal government at that level to try to figure it out?
Exactly.
Because it's going to be impossible. We can pretend. I think we just look to Ottawa too much for a bunch of stuff, to be honest with you. And it's in the Premier's best interest. Even if we talk about something like a carbon tax. Prior to the feds putting the carbon tax in, there were carbon pricing plans in a bunch of different provinces. Now that the feds put it in nationally, unless you had a backstop that was up to their standards, now all of a sudden we're just, looking at Ottawa, blaming Ottawa, when in fact some of these things have long been the jurisdiction of the provinces, especially when we talk about housing. The housing is absolutely a provincial issue. What we don't talk about enough, in my personal opinion, is, look, there's always going to be people that need additional layers and levels of support. Undeniable. But I just don't think we do enough to avoid people falling into that predicament of life. There's been some good programs introduced, like the Employment Stabilization Plan. In the pilot project itself, 170 people signed up. After 1 year, 40 were no longer on social assistance, standing on their own 2 feet, so to speak. So we're not doing enough.
Imagine if we got them earlier.
That's what I'm trying to say here. We're not doing enough to be proactive to keep people from falling prey to things like homelessness and addictions and the like. I mean, I know that it's easier said than done, but programs that have proven to be successful have been a long time coming. So we do the same thing in every industry, whether it be healthcare or otherwise. We react after the fact. We treat you when you're sick versus try to keep you healthy. We try to house you after you become homeless, rather than try to keep you from entering into the state of homelessness. So anyway, I know they're kind of hand in glove, or they dovetail each other, but they're two different streams of thought and two different streams of policy. I'll give you the final word because I'm late for the news, Robin.
Yeah, I just want to say that in relation to I was talking about the Federal Housing Advocate, because I wanted to say that at the same time that they were delivering this national virtual panel, we had a number of advocates in a CBC on the Signal talking about housing insecurity, and our new housing minister called in, and the comparison between the tone of desperation and fear and sadness and anger from the federal panel, and then watching the local advocates say that we're on the way. We got everything. Like, it was obvious to me that the local people who were on the panel have not spent any time at Tent City. They have no idea what is happening on the ground. And I believe that the executives of these organizations, as wonderful as they may be, and I am very privileged to call Sheldon Pollitt my friend, he is amazing, but he is separated from the reality of the organization. And until we start looking at what we're offering now to make sure that it's a proper model to replicate, we're going to continue to just put Band-Aids on a gaping, bleeding wound. And I'm scared. And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
I appreciate the time, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, there's a couple of callers in the queue. It's also a good day for you to get on and talk about whatever's on your mind. So if you're in the St. John's metro region, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888 590-VOCM, which is 8626. So Joe's in the queue to talk about the raises pending for the members of Parliament coming up on the 1st of April. And there's another caller talk about education. Don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Bigland FM radio network.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 1. Joe, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you today?
Doing okay, Joe. How about you?
Pretty good, thanks. Beautiful out there.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I was just listening to the news broadcast about the increase in the pay raises for MHAs. MPs.
Yep.
Up there, and I did a bit of delving into it yesterday and today, and it's not like these guys are getting a small rate of a salary. These guys are making quite a considerable amount of money for a period of probably 4 or less years. You know, they're going from just a backbencher alone goes from 194,000 a year up to 202, an 8% raise. And according to what I read online, the reason they get this is because whatever the union rates are across Canada, it went up this year by 4.1%. And if the union has over 500 in membership, well, members of Parliament will get the 4% raise. And that's where $1,000 is coming from. And if you were a minister, added on with a bit of punch, you get $12,000 raise. And if you're the Prime Minister, you get a $16,000 raise.
You're right. So just for clarification, so the annual raise for members of Parliament is based on, you're right, the average increase in union contracts, and it's not the 500 threshold for unions. It's also based on corporations with 500 employees or more. And you're right, the guesstimate at this point is 4.2%. And so let's just give some numbers for additional context, Joe, because this is an important conversation. Let's not just include this year. Let's go back to 2019, pre-pandemic. A member of Parliament at that time was earning just shy of $179,000. Current salary, $194,000. With the estimated raise, that's 202, as you mentioned, and you're right on the money there. So that means since 2020, the raise for a backbench member of Parliament is $23,000. For a minister, once earning $264,400, with this estimated pay raise, that would be an increase in pay since 2020 of $35,000. For the Prime Minister, $357. Bring it to the estimated raise. That means since 2020, raises of $47,600. For comparison, the average annual salary amongst full-time workers in Canada, according to StatsCan, $67,000.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, because I got it all here right in front of me. You know, and not only that, Patty, I mean, I went even deeper than that. I mean, these guys, let's take for argument's sake, 7 members in the House that we've got in Canada. You know, like there's 339 people in the House of Commons, and only 7 from Newfoundland, which is less than 2% of the number of people that are in the House of Commons. We just have 7 members. And not only, they've got to leave Newfoundland, they've got to have a place to stay, they got it. It's paid for. They got an apartment, they've got it. All their necessities are paid for. Transportation, you need a gas card, here you go. You need a cell phone, here you go. Oh, you need a staff. Okay, here's your assistant. Your assistant is here. You choose your assistant. Oh, you need a constituency office back home in your province. Well, we'll set one up for you. All this is also taken into account.
You're right.
You know, it's for 4 years, and not only that, Patty. I even dug a bit deeper. If these people just hang on for 6 years and put in 2 terms. I mean, 2 terms could be 2 years, all according if the government, you know, is defeated or whatever. But if you just serve 2 terms, by the time you're 55, you're eligible for a pension of $32,000 plus medical, plus dental. Everything.
But again, just to clarify one point there, yes, you have to be elected twice, but you have to serve 6 years in total to qualify for pension. Begins around 32, ranges up to 49,000. Of course, changes for backbenchers to ministers to the Prime Minister. Another interesting note on that side, Joe. There's legislation that's been tabled in Ottawa that is trying to delay the federal election in 2025. It was scheduled to take place on the 20th of October of 2025, but members of Parliament elected in 2019 are not eligible until October 21st of 2025, so they tabled legislation to delay the election 1 week. Consequently, 80 more members of Parliament could be qualified for their pension.
That's right. That's what they did. Not only that, I mean, here's this guy that came into Newfoundland a couple of months ago, bitching and complaining that this carbon tax is going to ruin us, and they're taking everything out. But nobody opened their mouth about the $8,000 that's going in their pocket. Nobody's open. No minister opened their mouth about the $16,000 that's going into their pocket. And here's another thing, Patty. You try to get a hold of your member. If you got a federal problem, Who do you talk? Who do you talk to? You don't talk to them. You talk to their assistant. Can I speak to the minister, please, or my member? I'm sorry, he's at a meeting. Well, when will he be available? Is he available tomorrow? No, he's at a meeting. I've contacted the federal government in my lifetime about 16 times, and I have never talked to my member. Never. Because you can't get them.
Now, I understand why it might be difficult, if not impossible, for every Canadian who wants to bend the ear of a cabinet minister or the prime minister to not be able to get it. But you're right. Even for some offices operated by members of parliament and their constituency assistants and their different associates, some offices are a little bit easier to get in touch with than others. I know of a couple here provincially where I've had great success trying to get some answers, and a couple of others, not so much. So they're not all created equal there either.
No, it's not. No, I got to say one thing. Best country in the world to live in is Canada. Bar none. I mean, all you got to do is look at what's going on in this world. And down the States, oh my God. And, that's a kettle of fish. The fact is that Canada is a great country, has a great democracy. We have very few members taking care of 39 million people. We don't have a lot of people, in the House of Commons. And you know yourself that members of Parliament who are elected, they're only there. They could be gone like a breath of wind in 6 years. It's the bureaucrats that take care of everything in this country.
Sure,
and
same.
They've been doing it for hundreds of years.
Yeah, same provincially. I mean, we have 338 members of parliament. Whether or not that's a good number or bad number, it has increased dramatically over the last 20 years. We have the second highest paid parliamentarians in the G7, so they're not exactly struggling. So while we hear them, commiserate with our struggles with cost of living, but you're right, not one member that I've heard of in this country has said out loud, let's not take our pay raise this year, lead by example. It has happened before. Out in the heels of the recession in 2008-2009, between 2010 and 2013, the members of parliament did not take a pay raise. I would suggest we're in a very similar predicament. We don't need to have a label of recession, but Canadians are struggling. The average full-time salary for Canadian is $67,000.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing before I leave, because I know you're busy?
Go ahead.
Back in 2008, Stephen Harper put one of his cronies in as senator. His name was Patrick Barrasso. He's 34 years old, born in 1974 as a senator. Now, he's going to get $159,000 a year until he's 75, which means that he only has to go up there, put his bum on a chair that's red for 41 years, and make $159,000. He doesn't have to go out and be reelected. He doesn't have to do squat. And like there's 105 of them like that until they reach the age of 75. And that's one thing I don't like about our government. We have 105 senators in the Canadian government that have no pull, that have no authority to do anything. Nothing. And all we do is pay them.
Well, they do something.
They get their assistants, they got their office, they got a place to live, they've got cars, they got everything they want. And here we are trying to figure out, I can't go to Sobeys today. I got to wait tomorrow because bread is on sale. They got money for everything. They got money for war. They got money to send our troops over here. They got money for this, money for that. But they got lots of money to pay themselves. This raise, by the way, Paddy, that they're getting this year, if they get it, it's going to cost us $68 million just for the backbenchers. $68 million.
Yeah, no, I've seen the numbers. Brazo is an interesting case study. I mean, he fell upon some pretty hard times. He pled guilty to assault and possession of cocaine. Yeah. There was lots of hard times he fell upon. And then, of course, the so-called famous boxing match with the Prime Minister, you know, all those things which are political theatre and sideshows and really have nothing to do with, you know, running or leading the country. It's all really quite strange. Joe, I'm late for the break, but I appreciate making time for the show.
Thanks for taking my call.
Anytime.
Bye now.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, the caller on line 3, appreciate your patience. She wants to talk about education. Don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Bigland FM radio network.
Welcome back. Let's go. Line number 3. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty.
Hi there.
I just wanted to talk to you today about the violence in schools topic.
Sure.
We have a son. He's 12. He's in grade 6. The violence in his small school of kindergarten to grade 6, a small school of 250 children, is rampant. The bullying and assaults were so bad that we enrolled him into martial arts so that if he was attacked, he would know how to defend himself. This has helped him a lot, but his self-confidence... this has helped him a lot with his self-confidence and to help him navigate in this new world. But the fights are a regular occurrence daily. In September, our son was being bullied and attacked on the bus and playground by 2 fellow students. I contacted the school board to ensure the safety of our child while in school. This has since been resolved, but the violence continues towards other students daily by the same bullies. I feel that children now do not know how to treat each other. Human respect is not being taught. The children are constantly bullying each other. And as long as they're not the ones being bullied and the attention is off them, the behavior continues in a mob mentality. Cell phones. I have seen cell phones in our child's school since grade 2. In my opinion, this is way too young, and I wonder what parents are thinking. The access to cell phones in schools has amplified bullying through children gathering online within Facebook Messenger and ganging up on one individual within a site. Snapchat. This is an app that allows the sharing of pictures and explicit GIFs that can be viewed once by the receiver and then deleted. Therefore, parents can't track of what's happening. In my opinion, Snapchat should have an age rating due to the lack of supervision. Porn. Children in our child's class who have access to smartphones are regularly accessing porn in school. They share these videos with other students in class. The activity on these websites are extremely violent towards women, and in my opinion, in a sexual assault category. These images and behaviors are being normalized by children, and I fear will be imitated to females as they get older. I fear for young girls who will be exposed to such violence once they mature and start dating. I feel that an increase of sexual assaults in Newfoundland will rise unless these porn sites are better regulated by the federal government of Canada. Parents are not taking responsibility for their children's behavior. I blame all of this on the internet and what our children are being exposed to. I feel that schools should ban cell phones and that the government should be doing a better job at protecting our children around social media.
Let me jump in for a second, because I know where you're coming from. So if, say, for instance, we ban cell phones from school, so that would be about, paying attention to the teacher and trying to absorb the curriculum. But even if you take it out of their hands during school hours, the concept of piling on digitally, being ganged up on with Snapchat or Facebook or what have you, is still going to happen at night or after school or what have you. So that's where I think we've got, parental controls, whether that be official parental controls on their device and or actually speaking with your child to know what he or she is up to, who they're interacting with and how they're behaving. So take them out of schools is a attention issue. Won't necessarily curb the pile-on. What do you think?
Well, I think it's the entire problem. I don't think cell phones should be in school. I think if you need to call home to your parents, you can go up to the office and use the phone. I don't think you should be able to watch a movie, play a video game in class, which is what's happening. The teachers are up to their eyeballs with the violence, let alone whatever is happening on someone's cell phone. There's no blocks on them. They can see whatever they want to, and then whether your child has a cell phone or not, their friend is sharing it. My child is being exposed daily to sexual violence in grade 6, in class, during math class. It's not appropriate.
No,
it needs to be regulated better.
People send me screen grabs of communications that their child has been involved in, and there's this one person sent me an email this morning, and it was about a suicide that has happened recently. And I'll leave the town and the school out of it. And I'm wondering why we haven't been talking about it. The problem is, until the family is willing to disclose what's happened, and we're talking about minors, it's hard to talk about anything other than in general terms, unless you, as a parent, is willing to talk about predicament that your child finds he or herself in. So, look, it can be tragic. We've seen these stories. This is not hyperbole for the sake of. It's actually happened in this country. Let's get back to the porn for a second. So, when you say the federal government needs to do a better job regulating it, how does that work? Because unless you put some controls on your own child's phone, how can the federal government try to control what's actually out there on the internet? Because every single thing under the sun, including every single evil, is lurking around every single corner on every device in our hands. So how does the federal government get involved on that front? I'm just curious if you can elaborate on that for me.
Well, I actually read an article about it on CBC. They were saying that, if you were to access Pornhub, for instance, if you were an adult and this is something that you regularly did, there would have to be some sort of number or something that you would have to put in, which is pre-registered to verify your age. And then if you don't have this number, you can't access it.
Yeah, that's it's the Online Harm Act. The problem with that is that, it makes all the sense in the world to try to protect children. The concept of is how. Because when they add other layers of confusing language to that particular piece of legislation, people think about the thought police, and you'd be penalized or potentially punished or possibly incarcerated for things you say. So if they just restricted it to, say, for 18 and under, here's how it's going to have to navigate based on these porn sites. And, of course, to try to catch every porn site and to try to add it to searching up the GIFs or searching up the memes or searching up just the images without actually having to go on the site really complicates that. I spoke to someone who I think is pretty knowledgeable on that front, and they said we can manage and regulate the sites. But even if I just do a Google search, I'm still going to have ample opportunity to just see screen grabs that have been posted by someone other than those porn sites. So it's going to be extremely tricky to get that right. But you're not wrong. The images of pornography, and sometimes pornography is not simply about, what people might refer to as traditional sexual relations. There's a lot of violence and stuff also associated with pornography that's out there for all to see. So I know entirely where you're coming from, and it has created a societal ill that's going to be hard to stuff that genie back in the bottle.
And what about, the cultural norms about, what age is it appropriate for your child to have a phone? I mean, grade 2? Holy cow. Grade 2, let's just give him a cell phone. Let's just throw a screen at this kid and let the cell phone be the babysitter. Why doesn't people start, take care of their children anymore? Why do these children have phones at such a young age? Why isn't there a time that you can actually receive a phone? Okay, Johnny, you're 15. You get your cell phone now because, maybe you're not very mature, but you're probably definitely more mature than you were at 8.
Yeah, no, that's, I don't think we're going to have, nor do we want, government to get involved and tell me what I can do at what age with my child if we're talking about things that are appropriate or not of the criminal nature. So that's going to be parental decisions. And I don't know what the appropriate age is. I can't even remember when our children got their phones. They certainly weren't in primary school, I can guarantee you that.
Well, that's what's happening now.
Oh, well, I see
it. In my opinion, they should all have flip phones if they're under a certain age so that they can, make a call, send a little text, but sending explicit messages, viewing explicit content in school, on school grounds, should be banned. Banned from school. Should not be in school. They're supposed to be learning how to read, do math, communicate. Instead, they're on their phones, zoned out, not participating in life, not learning, not communicating. All they're learning to do is send messages and bully each other.
It's all very troubling.
Inappropriate material.
I appreciate you making
terrible.
time.
I don't know, but I don't understand what's going to happen. These kids are going to have to take care of us when we get old, and we're shafted.
I really appreciate making time for the show here this morning. Thanks for the call.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Boy, oh boy. Let's see here. Let's take a break. When we come back, there's a gentleman in the queue who wants to tell us about a banking announcement. I'll leave some of the thunder for him. But, those things about, the banks closing in your smaller community, it's bigger issue than simply being able to cash your check or to pay a bill right, or to get some money from a teller. Because if people are leaving the communities to do some banking, you know full well when they go to the bigger centres with a bank, they're going to do other things like shop. So all of a sudden, some of the small gas stations and the small retail shops and the mom and pop convenience stores, they suffer just alongside with the fact that simply you can't go to a physical bank. Andrew's going to tell us about that right after this. Don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Bigland FM radio network.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Mayor of Fogo. That's Andrew Shea. Good morning, Mayor Shea. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Welcome to the program.
We got some great news this morning.
I've read the email, but go ahead.
A press release by Atlantic Edge Credit Union and the town of Fogo Island. Atlantic Edge Credit Union are opening a branch on Fogo Island later on this year, which is a godsend to us.
Obviously so.
News we could have.
So just inside the news release itself that your office sent along to me, it says you're in the throes of finalising plans. So is there some sort of approval process in place, or you're simply just working out some details between the two entities, the town and the bank?
No, this is a done deal. It's
Excellent.
Just that, there's a process to go through. It should open early fall. There's still a lot of work to do, but all the basic work is done. We've done everything that needs to be done. See what business are here, see how much money is on down, see what's available. Everything is a go. And Atlantic Edge are looking forward to coming here, and we're certainly looking forward to them coming here because it's been a hectic 20 months, I tell you.
I think you and I spoke last time about the possibility for credit union to come in and fill that gap because they have a different model than things like Scotiabank, which left your community. So are we talking about a full suite of services, not just ATMs and tellers, but investment advisors and mortgage brokers and the whole concept?
Yep. Yeah, a whole thing, loans for fishermen, loans for whoever wants a loan, everything. So it'll be a regular branch, and it will do all the services that can be done. Because they're expanding quite a bit, you see, Paddy. Atlantic Edge right now has 16 branches in Newfoundland. And they've recently, and why we're so long getting the branches, because they amalgamated 3 or 4 branches. Then we had COVID, and then we had a big disaster in Port of Astor hit office. So, it's been a hard year on a lot of things. So we finally got to the stage. I don't think there was ever a time after we approached them and talked to them for a few months that they weren't coming here. It just took this time because of the way things happened.
Yeah, and they've recently merged with Hamilton Sound Credit Unions as well, which makes it a pretty big entity. We're not talking about the big 5 banks kind of entity, but they have a bigger footprint than they ever have.
Oh, yes, and getting larger, So, yeah, because they recently took over Hamilton Sound, which is Gander, Carmenville, and Triton.
Right.
So there's 3 branches there, right? So we're the 16th branch now, and we're really looking forward to it because, see, it's more of a cooperative model, too, and Fogo Island is a cooperative. We've had the co-op here for 60 years, and they put some of their profits back into the community, which is going to be a big thing for the island. They're really community oriented. It's community oriented banking.
Mayor Shea, I mentioned before we went to the break that it's bigger than just having a place to go do your banking. What have some of the business owners on Fogo felt in the last 20 months? But the bank one Scotiabank left. So did we see a lot less money spent on the island when people say, for instance, went to Gander to bank and then they went to the shop and then they bought some clothes and they bought some gas? Was that the reality?
Well, to a certain degree, yes, because everybody had to go, you see, Paddy, because if you got a check, senior, and a lot of the seniors can't do banking by phone and things like that, they had to go to Gander to change it. And of course, they would pick up certain things, but it cost them a lot of money. I think when we got that $500 rebate, it probably cost every senior on Fogo Island $100 to go to Gander to get it changed. Because a lot of the stores won't take it anymore, because people take pictures of it and send it to their bank, and then they try to change it.
Yeah.
So banks start, so businesses don't take it anymore. And of course, businesses need money. So every week they had to send someone in, a courier or someone in, to take their deposits in and pick up change, and it's costing everybody a lot of money, to do this. And we're tickled pink this morning that this has come true. And I tell you, the people are still asking, is there something coming? And we're so glad it's a credit union and someone we can work with. And the town itself will be starting to work on the building right away now, and within a few weeks to help prepare it for, early fall opening. And in June, in June, the executives from Atlantic Credit Union are coming out and having a meeting with all businesses, and then they're having a meeting with the general public to let them know exactly what's happening.
Are they taking over the old bank site?
Yeah, we managed to get that from right from the start. We had it in our mind that we wanted something to come here. We didn't think we thought it would take a long while, but we went to Nova Scotia and they donated the bank to the town of Fogo.
Interesting.
So we own the bank because now we own the bank. It was a big draw for them too, so we didn't have to look for a building. Everything is pretty well there, ready to go. We just got to do some modernization and very little modernization, but we got to do some renovations for them. Basically, that's it.
I don't know if you want to share some financial details, but are they going to lease the building from you, or how's that arrangement going to work?
Well, basically, we've got into a deal with them. Basically, they don't want to own any real estate for the first 5 years anyway, right?
Okay.
So we have a deal worked out with them for their taxes and the lease, and probably got something in there that in 5 years, if they want to buy it, we'll turn it over to them. That kind of thing.
And I'm not going to get you to speak to this necessarily, but, you mentioned Fogo was a sort of a cooperative spot, given the co-op in the fishery, and, we got the co-op in the Labrador Shrimp Company. I know Ryan Clary and his team are trying to launch a cooperative for fish harvesters at large. But I've always wondered why there's not more cooperatives here in the city, here in the province. There's even cooperative housing that has been financed by the federal government recently, so I'm wondering why there's not more of that collaborative approach taking place. I just want to pick your brain on one last thing before I let you go. So, we all look to governments to do whatever we need in our day-to-day lives. Municipalities are responsible for a lot of the stuff that you touch day by day. Then we look to the province. Then we look to Ottawa. When the concept of trying to mimic some of the champions, picking up the torches as just regular citizens. And not everybody's got a Zeta Cobb, but everybody can have a Shorefast Foundation. What has that group meant to the prosperity and life on Fogo? Because I think we just maybe have a bit too much of a reliance on government sometimes, when those types of foundations or organizations can really drive a lot of the buses.
Are you talking about the cooperative?
Yes.
Yes, of course. When the crab fishery was open last year, the co-op started buying right away. We didn't have any hang-up, whereas there was people around here who couldn't sell crab till maybe June, July month, because you own the business and it works great. And you got your own workers, you got everything, and it's all contained within the island, and you got a say in everything that's going on, and it's just common sense. To me, it is.
Yeah, it's a model that's proven to be extremely effective, and I'm not entirely sure about the resistance. I guess for some people, they just want to keep their own piece of the pie and have nobody dabbling with it or trying to split it up any further. Mayor Shea, congratulations on this.
But one more thing, though, sure. Patty, I'd like to say is that even though you got a cooperative, it got to change, right? And then when we started the cooperative, we were building our own longliners because the fishermen and the people, we were fairly poor off at the time, and we put sweat equity in it, and we cut our timbers and things like that. And then we moved away from that to offshore fishing and things like that. So there's a constant change, The co-op is a leading edge, and we're doing sea cucumbers and things like that, which you can do because you have the money and you have people backing you all the time. But we're really pleased with this announcement, I must say. Atlantic Edge this morning made a lot of people happy, especially seniors, still, I tell you.
Well, I'm really pleased for you and the residents on Fogo. It's absolutely a big victory. And, add to it in the fishery, some of that high-value hand-line cod has also been a feature of the co-op. It's good to have you on the show, Mayor Shea. Congratulations.
Yep. Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome.
We'll talk again soon, hopefully.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Fair enough. That's a big win for them because that really does mean more than simply a bank, a physical bank. Question being posed by a Twitter follower. Can government investigate the amount of teachers being charged with sexual acts and violence against students in the last 5 years? Marcus Hicks alone, of course, has 150 sexual violence charges. Many young people continue to come forward on that Marcus Hicks stuff, but that's a brutal story. There are others. Where's the outrage, the protest, the inquiry? Why are they being protected? I think the outrage is widespread. I can only speak for, my conversations and my own thoughts on it, but I'm completely outraged. And the protest, I think, has been pretty widespread once again. I mean, obviously, to protect our children from just violence and certainly acts of sexual violence, but I'm not entirely sure what's being suggested here about someone's protecting them, because when the stories are in the news, they get reported on pretty widely, like the Noel Strapp story, right? Convicted. Marcus Hicks and the charges against. The female teacher whose name eludes me at this moment in time, she was charged with sexual assault against a minor and was acquitted of that particular charge. But when those incidents take place in school, I know full well that we're going to cover it. And without question, everybody I know is absolutely not only outraged, and I guess that's the proper word, outraged when we hear these types of stories, because anyone in a position of authority that does anything like that to a child is particularly heinous. And yes, we should be outraged, and the investigation should happen. Let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, time for you. Don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Big Land FM radio network.
Welcome back. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Juanita Mercer. You're on the air.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing great. How about you?
Good. I just wanted to call real quick. I'm on my way to cover an event, but I wanted to give a shout out to all of the finalists for the Atlantic Journalism Awards, which were announced yesterday. Such a fantastic showing for this province, and congratulations to you folks at VOCM. You're finalists in, I believe it was 3 categories. Mm-hmm. I'm a reporter at the Telegram. I know we're finalists in 6, and across Newfoundland and Labrador outlets, we account for 32% of the finalists at the Atlantic Journalism Awards, despite making up as a province just 27% of the population in Atlantic Canada. So I think it's just a fantastic showing for the finalists for the Atlantic Journalism Awards. I just want to give a shout out to all of my colleagues.
Good on you for doing it. And congratulations to those in-house here at VOCM that have been nominated as a finalist, and to you and your team with your 6 nominations. I'm unsure about the other media outlets. I haven't really checked this morning as of yet, but I'll be happy to share the applause around. And of course, I've been in a story that you wrote regarding a Christmas memory. I'm still pretty embarrassed about it. What idea?
I thought it was a great story.
Very quickly before I let you go, I know that a judge has now got involved to talk about the restructuring of Saltwire, and we cannot lose local journalism regardless of what you think about the Telegram itself or the Charlottetown or the Herald up along. What are you being told in-house? Are you able to share?
I can just, I guess, say what we see in the news. That I think they're working really hard to keep us going, and we're all very optimistic. I know in our newsroom anyway. I'm very optimistic. I can't see a future without the Telegram. I think we serve a very crucial role in democracy and in the province and telling people stories. So I think we'll always be around.
Fingers crossed. I appreciate that. Didn't mean to put you on the spot. Appreciate the time. Congratulations to you and your team. Stay in touch.
Congratulations to you. Thanks so much.
My pleasure,
congratulations to everybody.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. So Juanita Mercer, a reporter at the Telegram. Let's go to line number 4. So good morning to the NDP member for St. John Centre. He's the leader of the party. That's Jim Dinn. Jim, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Morning to you.
I just want to take a minute to talk about the NLTA's announcement yesterday and the minister's response to it, and the whole issue of not just violence in the classroom, but it's also about resourcing of inclusive education. And I would take it again that yesterday was yet another wake-up call, one of many, I would argue, with regards to the resourcing of inclusive education. And I hope that the minister is listening and takes it to heart. I will start, if I may. I just want to read some excerpts from a letter from a parent who wrote me back in February, and this is from in central Newfoundland. But it's not an urban. It's not in the urban center of northeast Avalon. But talks about the 3 years have for her child has been nothing short of exhausting. The child did not feel safe, and I'm trying to make sure here I don't identify the school or the community. And this parent reports chairs being thrown. So this is over 3 years. Chairs been thrown, tables being flipped, personal space invaded, being spit on. Came home one day with their brand new water bottle broke in pieces. Everything spilled out. The child, as this parent says, that learning has come to a standstill for her child and the other children in the school. Not blame, very clear, it's not about the issue at school, but she clearly says that no extra resources have been put in place. Yesterday was the worst day. The water bottle had again been thrown across the classroom. Pencil case smashed so much that her belongings had to be placed into a plastic bag. Everything was ripped from the child's desk. Other students' belongings and thrown across the classroom, broken as well. And the children eventually had to be put into another grade level's classroom for the rest of the day. So, as this parent says, our children haven't been benefiting from school at all this year and unable to be learned or taught. And I would argue that this is an issue that we've seen in the media in various forms lately. The interview with Mike Walsh, who was a retired teacher. I've had emails from school administrators on the same thing. A teacher in the metro area, and I've spoken to staff members of the school who had her basically jaw fractured as a result of being struck by a water bottle wielded by a student. And I think of my own wife, who was a grade 2 teacher, and some of the stories that she would tell and having to clear the classroom. So I think, it's, and in all of this, in every one of them, in every case that I've heard, teachers have yet to blame the child. They see the responsible. It comes down to that in many ways, as some school counselors explained to me, this is probably the child's only way of expressing that there's something wrong. And the teachers I've spoken to, they feel powerless in trying to help the student. They feel under-resourced. They feel overwhelmed by the challenges ahead in front of them. And in some cases, Patty, I've spoken to you about this before. Actually, I've probably spoken to you about this even when I was president of the NLTA, the same kind of issue about, the class composition and then the class size. There's one of the things we've called for is that it's not just Minister Howell talks about we just can't throw resources at it. Well, I think you need to look at the composition in the classrooms, mostly at the primary and elementary level, I would argue.
Let's take this one step at a time, Jim.
Yeah, sure thing.
When, we hear people say, well, it's not the child's fault. I understand that, we have pent-up emotions and maybe there's something happening that we're unaware of at home or in their own personal lives, and that outburst could be a result of that. But just let me take the other side of that coin for a second. Yep. If we remove all the responsibility and all the accountability from the child, isn't that part and parcel with how we got here?
I would argue. Look, I taught high school. I will be honest with you. I rarely saw the levels of the violence that I would see in the primary and elementary school. Okay, when I would go around. So you're dealing with, I guess, by the time they get to high school, maybe they're socialized out of it. They've learned. You've got that maturity, or maybe they've dropped out of school as well. Whatever the reason, but it comes down to it. I think you will talk to most primary teachers. It comes down to whether we would talk about children unable to self-regulate. I agree with you. I'm not arguing, saying that there's no responsibility, but I also think it comes down to the resources there. Okay, how do we help not only the children in the classroom, but even that child, so that child is not simply excluded from school, but also has the supports in the classroom. And I will guarantee you that whether school administrators or teachers, what they're struggling with is whether it's an alternative setting, whether it's about putting the resources in the help of family, and it's not just within the school; it's outside. But I would agree with you. I'm not negating the responsibility of the child. But if you're talking about a child in grade 2 or kindergarten, it's I would argue it's different than talking to a high school student, an 18-year-old, and where you can have a conversation with that child, with that student. So there is a difference, and I guess it comes down to what is the resourcing there. Whether it's occupational therapists, smaller classes that reflect the needs in that classroom. Maybe it's individualized instruction. Maybe it's an alternative setting. But at some point, right now, the examples that I'm hearing not only from teachers and parents, it's a more widespread problem then we think it's not just an urban issue. It's in small schools.
Oh, of course it is. I think, Jim, what we've done here is we've unfortunately splintered the conversation. We'll focus on the student, and then it's the teacher, and then it's the student assistant, and then it's the teaching assistant, and the VP, and the principal, and the parents. But the school community has got to be the conversation. So if in grade 2 it's different than talking to a grade 12 student, which you're absolutely right, the pendulum has swung too far. Like many facets of life, back when I was in school, corporal punishment was part of it. I mean, I got the strap more than once, and it was pretty rough, and teachers were pretty rough physically and verbally and emotionally with students sometimes. But now we've gone the exact opposite direction. The pendulum has now swung so far the other way that the authority to keep the classroom under control has been virtually stripped away from the teachers. The responsibilities of the vice principal are now more administrative than they were to talk about the behaviors and the atmosphere in school. So we've just gone the other way. If my mother or father got a phone call from school, I was in trouble. And now it's more like, how dare you say that my son or daughter is being a bad person or a bad student or a nuisance or a disruptor? Because that's what's happened here. We have just gone so far from the bad old days that we've created another form of the bad old days where people are falling behind.
It's interesting. When I did my teaching degree, one of the places I volunteered at was at Exxon House, and you look at the whole the inclusive education, and did I support it? Sure, I did. And all teachers will. But it comes down to when if you have the students with with more complex needs, and what does it need? I guess what I'm trying to say, inclusive education is more than just simply putting students in the classroom. And we're also finding that there are greater needs, like children, I can tell you, mostly in the primary and elementary grade, it's not just simply about discipline or class control. It comes down to some very serious issues that we're dealing with. And I guess it comes down to, Patty, for me, and I'm this is from my own conversations with, especially in the primary grades, it comes down to the teacher's ability to deal with individual needs is a lot more limited in a large class size. I will tell you, I had the utmost respect for primary and elementary and even junior high teachers, but not that I have respect for all teachers. But I got to say, those in the teachers in the primary and elementary grades, they're dealing with, some very fundamental needs, and just not only the learning, but also trying to deal with children who are probably having a difficult time grasping whatever emotional or mental health issue that they may have, or learning issue. So I think at some point, my issue yesterday with the minister's response is, well, we've got to have more. We're having these committees. I'm tired of committees. I'm tired of the accords. I'm tired of hearing about the task force and think tanks. Every one of the issues that we're talking about now have been identified long before I was president of the Teachers Association. They're still there. I talked about them. I can tell you that going back to David, there are solutions there. We've brought them up. We actually came up with a formula. Here's a one way in which we can address the needs in the classroom. It has been, continually dismissed. So at some point, I think if I were the Minister of Education yesterday, take a clear warning that there's a lot more to this than just reports. That we have reports, we have solutions out there, or partial solutions. And I think also, to go beyond that, it's also working with families, because families also have stresses and strains outside of the school that has to be brought
That's
up.
Why I called it a school community conversation.
No, and I agree. And you hit the nail on the head. It's all parties. It's not. And by no means am I saying it's just on the teacher or on the parent. But I think, but it's the school community. What's the saying? It takes a village to raise a child. Well, I think, and very much here, that applies here. Not to make it trite, but to very clearly that it's more. We're dealing with small human beings, and what we want them to do is to grow up into fully participating human beings and fully realize their potential, whatever that is. But I think here at the lower grades, there's got to be. got to start looking at how something other than just simply here's the student-teacher ratio, and it's got to be clear about what are the needs in that classroom, because some of the classes I'm hearing issues are like in the 25 plus, others are in less than 10. So it tells you that there are needs there, and that and that when a teacher is put through his or her paces and just trying to make sure learning takes place, and also make sure that children are safe, there's an issue.
Understood. And last one, because I'm really late for the news, we have to work on all the issues concurrently, but a good place to start would be with guidance counsellors, because we have so many behaviour problems. The current ratio of 1 to 500, the recommendation 15 years ago was to move it to 1 to 333. Starting there can really go a long way to controlling emotions, controlling behaviours, establishing coping skills, some things which seemingly are absent for the most part. Jim, I appreciate the time and the conversation.
One last question. I'll put it, occupational therapists. We're the only jurisdiction that doesn't have occupational therapists in the school system. They would be an extremely good addition to the resources. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Jim.
Paddy.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Jim Dinn, the leader of the NDP, member for St. John's Centre. Let's take a break. Ross, you're next. Talk about the cost of living. Don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Bigland FM radio network.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Ross, you're on the air.
Hi, Paddy. I was recently involved in arranging for a 40-foot shipping container to come to St. John's from China, and it has to be 2 legs, China to Halifax, and then the second leg will be a second shipment from Halifax to St. John's. The price to get the 40-foot container from China to Halifax was $5,500 US, which is around $7,500 Canadian, which would take about almost 2 months, about 6-7 weeks to get here. Then that same shipping container to get from Halifax to St. John's, which would take 24 to 36 hours, is $7,900. So it just blows me away that a shipping container 6 to 7 weeks on route from halfway around the world is cheaper in Halifax to St. John's, whether it came by ship again or by tractor trailer, including the ferry. And it just goes to show how Newfoundlanders, being where we are paying a lot more than most because of the cost of shipping to get things to our province.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what would be behind that, but I'm going to guess that part of the role is like we see that massive cargo ship that struck the bridge in Baltimore. When you see international shipping, you see these absolutely massive vessels that carry so much in the way of goods, and then you get here, and then all of a sudden we're talking about maybe Ocean X or some other potential, maybe on the back of a truck on Marine Atlantic, and consequently, cost per unit shoots up just based on basic math. So I'm not sure that contributes to the absolutely glaring disparity between international shipping and domestic shipping, but I'm thinking it probably plays a role. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I understand that volume. You get cheaper volume, but I mean the amount of time that is taking up space on those massive ships is one thing, but the short amount of time that it's on the smaller ships, such as Ocean X, is another.
Yep.
But whether it's Ocean X or, like, I called around a couple of different transport companies, and there wasn't a lot that I were willing to go from Halifax to St. John's, and maybe just lack of competition as well. Like, I mean, if you only get 2 or 3 companies that are able to carry it for you, then, you know, they can keep their prices pretty high.
Well, it goes back to the concept of competition, like we're talking about in the fishery, for instance. And same thing, I think, can be said for telecom in Canada. Same thing can be said for insurance and banking, almost everything. When competition, and the Competition Bureau of Canada has been quite clear on these things, we have a lack of. And consequently, we are paying what people constitute too much for a lot of things that we touch. Ross, out of curiosity, and feel free not to answer, what are you bringing over? Or is that private?
Well, that is not private, but last year I partnered up with somebody to offer a dinosaur park at back of my property on Thorburn Road. And we're just bringing over a few more dinosaurs. And, you know, they're big enough that I need a 40-foot container. So, you know, we got the prices, and that's what the pricing is coming in at.
Yeah, it's a pretty whopping big number. And then even look at some other contributing factors with the shortage of actual shipping containers in the world, which is so weird.
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing too, Paddy, like a lot of people you see talking on social media how the packaging, the goods inside the packaging is smaller than it used to be, but yet the packaging box looks the same size. I recently saw a picture of Premium Plus crackers. I mean, you can fit your fingers down on the side of the box between the sleeve of crackers and the package, and it's about 3/4 of an inch or an inch away from the top, whereas they used to be snug one time. And I recently bought a box of chicken wings at Walmart. Maple Leaf was the brand, and when I opened up the box, these are the freezer ones, you just throw it, they're already seasoned. When I opened up the box, I was amazed to see that the number of wings in the vacuum bag inside, when I laid it alongside the box, was less than half of the height of the bag. Of the box. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this box takes up twice the volume, or cubic meters, whatever way you want to measure it, as what the contents does inside. So if Maple Leaf, made their packaging smaller to fit the contents, then they can get twice as many packages or boxes in a carton and twice as many cartons on a pallet. And that way they get twice as many products or twice as much product to the store shelves with half the shipping cost.
They've done their math on that. They understand it, because retail is a science, right? So they know full well, even though they totally mislead us with the lack of descriptions in the packaging, they know, I guess they figured out that increased transport costs is made up quite easily and have less of their products being sold for the same price or more in the stores. So that whole shrinkflation is infuriating.
Yeah, but I mean, just the content of the package is half the size of the packaging, and I mean, I just think mathematically it would make more sense to reduce the size of the package. That way, the Maple Leaf will be buying half the amount of cardboard for their packaging. They're shipping twice as much product for the same weight of product that the customer is getting, and probably that would help save cost on the manufacturer, such as Maple Leaf, and pass a little bit of savings on to the customer.
I totally know where you're coming from. My thought is that in the levels of big business, they'll do the math very carefully down to 10 decimal points as to what is the best bang for their buck when we refer to profitability. But you're right, they could probably save on transportation, but does that mean they would save enough to overcome the additional revenues they're generating because less of the product is in the package for the same price we paid when it was 500 grams and now it's 400 grams? So it's an interesting conversation and one that's ongoing around the country. I think we need to do more with the retailers anyway for how they label the packaging. They should be very upfront with Canadians as to what has changed, but of course they don't, and consequently we're paying more or the same for less.
Yeah,
terrible stuff. Ross, I appreciate the time and the conversation.
I was going to give you that was my 2 cents worth, but since things are being rounded and no such thing as 2 cents anymore, I guess my 2 cents worth is worth zero.
Let's make it worth a nickel.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ross. All the best. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, the budget, schools, homelessness, whatever you want to talk about, don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Big Land FM radio network.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 2. Doc, you're on the air.
How are you, Paddy? How are you this morning?
Best kind. How about you?
Pretty good, Bob. Pretty good, I must say. I've been listening to your program on and off, doing some work here at the house this morning, and you got a fascinating program this morning, I must say. Some of the issues that have come up regarding schools and discipline and government and so on are really, really timely. What I wanted to address this morning is 3 of the issues that are going to come before Parliament next week. And they're all Trudeau Liberal government initiatives, but it remains to be seen whether each party will vote for them or whether each of the MPs will vote for them. But it's been on the news a lot this morning, but I think it's worthy of more comment. One is on April 1st, of course, we have an increase in the carbon tax, 23%. Secondly, we have on April 1st, on top of that, we have our MPs who are giving themselves a really, really generous salary increase. Thank you very much. And thirdly, one that hasn't been mentioned, which is really interesting too, and that is there's a bill coming forth next week to defer the 2025 election by a week or so.
All of which we've talked about, or I've talked about on the show.
Yeah, right. And, of course, as you know, the idea there is to allow more MPs who are not now eligible for a pension to get that pension prior to any election, the next election, right?
The number's 80. So for those who hadn't heard the conversation prior, if you were elected in 2019 as a Member of Parliament, you don't qualify for your pension. If you're elected twice and serve 6 years until the 21st of October of 2025, the federal election, if it goes by the date currently on the books, will be on the 20th of October. Consequently, legislation tabled to defer for a week to the 27th. Consequently, 80 more members can get a pension possibly, and that's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, so there's only one descriptive for all of this, and it's greed.
Shady.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder about the mental attitude that exists in Ottawa. Now, what I'm going to be watching is how the Liberal Party members vote for these pieces of legislation, how the Conservative Party votes for these pieces of legislation, and also how the NDP vote for, and the Bloc.
Now, is there a vote required on the pay raise? I think there probably is, but there's no vote required any further on the carbon tax. The non-confidence motion brought forward by Mr. Polyev was, of course, voted down, and we all knew it would be. And, you know, you can call that whatever you want, but I think the carbon tax issue is pretty much settled and solved. Not to say it's a good thing, because 23% sounds like a whopping big number. I've actually, Doc, got people telling me that I'm going to face a 23-cent increase on the 1st of April. So it's funny how numbers get used and tangled up and what have you. Yeah. So it's 3 cents. We're going from 14 to 17 cents a litre on the 1st of April, and the Prime Minister's quite obstinate on this one.
Yeah, and you're right. The only legislation that could come forth, I guess, in a better world, in a better political world, would be legislation to negate that particular increase in the carbon tax. But the other two items require a vote: the salary increase and the pension deferral, or the election deferral, so that the boys and girls in Ottawa can get their pretty generous pensions that they wouldn't get unless they ran another term and got elected.
I find it a little bit disappointing, I'll choose for a word, that it's fine to talk about the carbon tax, and we should, but for members of Parliament on the other side, the opposition sides, to tell us all the time that they're so concerned with the cost of living and the lack of leadership and what have you, but not a peep out of anybody about a pay raise or pensions.
I know.
I mean, it's simply not good enough.
It's not. I mean, it's two-faced. You know, if you can't speak out of each side of your mouth, in particular if you're a politician, but it's going to be interesting to see, in particular, how the Conservative Party votes on this issue, because they've been cracking the whip on cost of living and, you know, axe the tax and keep it down, keep the cost of living down. We'll see. I know their position on the carbon tax, but, I mean, you have to lead by example.
You do. And, you know, there's a lot of hypocrisy. Now, politics is always going to be wrought with it. But let's say, for instance, the 7 premiers that have asked for a pause, or the axe of the tax, which would include Moe and Smith, Daniel Smith in Alberta. But here's where it gets just, you know, politics is has strange bedfellows. While Premier Smith wants that 3 cents to go away on April 1st, on the exact same day, the Premier is increasing the gas tax in Alberta by 4 cents. So, I mean, again, talk about cake and eat it too kind of stuff. You know what I think is missing, though, in the carbon tax conversation? And look, everyone is easy enough to say, do you want to pay less tax? The answer is, by and large, yes, I would prefer that, ma'am or sir. But what we don't have, and the Prime Minister, which I think is probably an interesting move, is now challenging the premiers who are asking for the tax to go away with alternatives. And that's been absolutely, completely absent from the conversation, hasn't it? You know, we can say something broad strokes like, well, technology. What technology? Are you talking about carbon capture? And if so, how much does that cost? Right? How effective is it? What do we forecast in a reduction of emissions? Since the carbon tax has come in, people don't want to hear it, but emissions are down 8%. And that has a moving target as it relates to population, though, as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, you kind of have to be very critical of the information that's coming out and decide for yourself whether or not it's true or not true, like whether or not the rebate, the carbon tax rebate, is more, people will get more back than they're paying in. Now, the Budget Office says, no, that's not so. When you take the full impact of the carbon tax, we're going to pay more we're going to suffer more under the carbon tax. I mean, let's put it that way. And we're not going to get rebates that compensate for the amount of the carbon tax that you pay. And, I mean, that makes sense. Why would anybody get you to pay a tax and give you back more than you paid? It's just not logical. And there are issues involving other things here that, as you point out, there are discrepancies and things that are contrary to each other.
Yeah, I do think the conversation regarding alternatives is an important one, because let's just say, based on the polls today, it looks like the government may indeed change hands. And Canadians, regardless of what you think about carbon tax, Canadians quite clearly in the last 3 general elections have voted for parties with climate change policy. 66% of Canadians in the last election. And I do think that reflects the overall sentiment in the country that we need to be mindful and we need to take some action. But what that action is, seemingly is lost in the conversation. So,
well, yeah, and that's the nub of the whole issue there. I think most people realise that we have to do things to protect our environment, but not everybody agrees that this punitive attention paid solely to the carbon tax is going to solve the problem. I mean, we all know that there's damage to the environment when it comes to excessive emissions, but whether or not that's the total answer remains to be seen, and most people view the carbon tax as being, and it's a punitive tax. I mean, the purpose of the carbon tax is to make things so expensive and make gasoline so expensive that you will actually turn away from gasoline, drive less, or buy an electric car.
Or carpool, or take public transit, or whatever. There's a variety of options. The large emitters are kind of left out of it a little bit too. As opposed to the way we pay a carbon tax, the large emitters, they do something called output-based. So basically what that means is a large industry, they pay the carbon price only in the last 10-20% of their emissions versus how we are taxed on that particular front. So if the alternatives include more of a focus on large emitters and then technology and innovation to reduce their emissions and change the way they do business, that would have a bigger impact than on regular everyday Canadians. So I would suggest that be part of the conversation.
You have to realise that our own Liberal government here in the province was quite in favour of the carbon tax so long as they were getting the revenue from it. It was only after the carbon tax regime changed and the revenue in Newfoundland and Labrador from the carbon tax, instead of going into the provincial budget, it was going to the federal level. And at that point in time, the government of Newfoundland and Labrador started on, well, we're against the carbon tax. Well, you weren't in the beginning. When you were getting the money, you put it in the budget and spent it.
Carbon tax is 2 different things, isn't it? Provincially and federally. Provincially, You're right, it was in provincial coffers, but what was not included when we had that old regime was any type of rebate, regardless of how many people get the rebate, and whether it comes close to what you spend in carbon taxation, it was still a different feature. On the federal scheme, people at least get a rebate. On the provincial scheme, we got nothing. We just pay tax at the pump. Doc, I got to get to the news. Last thought to you.
Okay, thanks, Paddy. Have a good Easter, you and your family.
The same to you. Thanks for the call.
Thanks, bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, break for the news. Trina, you're next to talk about the schools. Don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Big Land FM radio network.
Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 3. Trina, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I wanted to follow up. The last time we had a conversation was on Pink Shirt Day, and I had called about violence and bullying and harassment and the importance of being good to each other and having those conversations at home over dinner that evening. I wanted to follow up on that and the conversations that we've had in this space over the last, it's been a couple of years now that I've been calling your program about this. First, I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Langdon and the NLTA for launching this campaign. I think this is a very important conversation that we need to have about what's happening in our schools. I've listened to your commentary and other, shows about absenteeism and performance and, the marks for students. And, when we think about in our own work world, walking into, our employment place and being unsure of our safety and what's happening in that environment, makes me wonder, for children who are going into school with real threats of being harmed, how do they focus? How do they study? How do they make sure that they're making, they're focusing on that chemistry or that whatever's being taught at that point if they're scared? The conversation that I'd like to talk about a little bit today is this being not just a school issue, but a community issue.
100%.
These are learned behaviors, and people are learning these things at home. The language I heard there was a report just after I spoke with you on Pink Shirt Day about a child in my kid's school who was being threatened of being jumped. And jumped is language that you've heard at home or somewhere else in the school that you've learned. The conversation, I was listening to a parent earlier talking about their personal experience, and they said they put their kids in martial art. The kids are being taught, if someone hits you, hit back harder. The question about cell phone, this child who was threatened to be jumped on Pink Shirt Day actually used that cell phone to dial 911 for help because they didn't have access to outside supervision. And after grade 7, I've learned that the policy with the school is that there is no outside supervision available. Now, I've served on school council when this conversation was happening, so I do have experience with that. I've served in the community, and I've spoken with you about conversations that I've led nationally with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities about bullying and harassment and violence that we've heard about right across this country. So I think it's a broader conversation. I think that people need to come together, and we need to get the right people in the room and have a conversation about this. And I actually went so far myself as to send an email to the minister back when I was aware of this situation, and I've been told that they are working on it. But I think it's really important that, people are heard and listened to from all perspectives here, and that, conversations come together where the right people are in the room. Because I know the RNC, take a look on their website, they have a program called Students Taking Responsibility in Violence Education. It's called STRIVE. And it's, just above the DARE program. Now, DARE, lots of us know about it. It's drugs and, but the STRIVE program, I didn't know existed until it was something that was mentioned to me. And I know with my community work as a council member, I've asked that, community safety be discussed at our council, and that, we have our staff work with the RNC Community Services Division. But is there a conversation where the district or the department could work with the RNC and have these officers come in? How often are they doing this presentation? Can they build out on this? Is there funding that could be provided to make that a bigger program? I know with the DARE program that municipalities who are already strapped and need, financial support for a lot of different things are being asked to contribute to the DARE program. Well, is that something that other levels of government can have a conversation about STRIVE and violence? And I know the conversation that we had when I was leading it a couple of years ago at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities was in response to increased violence. At that time, the conversation was around women, but it's certainly open to be a bigger conversation. So I think from a cultural perspective, we need to have a look at this. I do think it's important. I know the Lions Club have a program called Lions Quest. I know that the Red Cross has a program that they have around anti-bullying and safety. I think that the conversation, for kids between grade 7 to, wherever else, let's have a conversation about what resources are available. If a child is outside and they're on school grounds and they're being threatened of personal harm, what do they do? And if there isn't a teacher there that's available to go to and say, hey, I need help, what does that child do? And, if I could take it back to us being adults in our personal workplace, we have occupational health and safety. We have, infrastructure in place for us as adults to keep us safe. So I think we need to have a broader conversation about what infrastructure is in place to support the teachers. And I know the teachers and administrators are doing their level best in a situation to try to help their students and each other. But I think that there needs to be a broader discussion. I think people need to be heard and listened to. There needs to be more public consultation engagement in how this is rolling out and where to from here, and how do we fix and address this as a community.
The community concept is where this belongs, in my personal opinion, because, we can use some of the very easily said, sometimes throwaway comments like, it all starts at home. But in many respects, it's absolutely true. And the comment I made to Jim Dinn earlier, I'll stand by. The pendulum has swung on a variety of issues in society, and including education. You know, the bad old days where it was corporal punishment ruled the roost, and the teacher sometimes ruled with an iron fist. That didn't work because corporal punishment is proven not to be effective. But all the way to where we are today, you know, the accountability or the lack thereof, the tools available in the teacher's tool belt or the vice principal, they're kind of gone. Now, where that happy compromise is anybody's guess. But if we just look at different facets one by one, we're probably not going to get anywhere in this one. It's not just about the student or the teacher or the teaching assistant or the student assistant or the VP or the principal or the family. It's everything. And until we all get on the same page and are willing to play an active role in making schools safer and better. And I don't try to focus in simply on scores because that's only part of the conversation, but some of those numbers are probably directly reflective of problems at home, poverty, the way the curriculum is devised, the way we evaluate students, the lack of safety and the unsafe environment at schools. I think they all dovetail each other, and they all have a direct impact on each other.
I agree, Patty, and I think it's important. You know, the minister talked in her news conference yesterday about, you know, they're already looking at this and they're involved. But I think from a parenting perspective, from a community perspective, the transparency about who is talking about what are you doing, what is that plan, what does it look like, which players do you have around the table, are you already talking to the RNC, are you already looking at putting money into Strive? Are you already doing an evaluation of some of these programs that exist and are being used internationally to support young people and families as they move forward? You know, when are you and how are you having open engagement and conversation with the public so we can provide feedback? I know at my child's school there was a questionnaire that came out the other day, and I responded to it, but there was like 300 characters to respond to an answer that required more space than that. So I think it's really important that we continue to have this conversation. I want to tip my hat to the NLTA and, you know, Mr. Langdon for opening this space, having the dialogue, thank the people who are participating in it. But, you know, talk is one thing, and then planning and actions and figuring out how do we address this as a collective and where do we all fit in, and how can I, as a community member, community leader, community representative, bring this into a broader plan where, you know, we've got different orders of government working together, different organizations coming together. There's a lot of people who want to volunteer their time in this space to help make things better, and I perfectly agree with you. There's a lot more at play than just, you know, one or two things here. But I really think that a comprehensive approach moving forward that's transparent, multifaceted, and, you know, that has a response for those kids. There are children right now who are being dropped off at school and parents dropping their kids off that are fearing that they're going to be harmed because a teacher might miss something or their kid might go outside and not be safe. And Snapchat we talked about earlier. Snapchat was actually used in the instance that I'm referring to let a child know that, hey, if you come to school, kids are looking for you. So that kid could get ahead of it. So, you know, it's not that tools are provided or kids have access to resources. It's teaching them how to use it and how do we have the conversations in safe spaces about how do we have safer communities, how do we have safer schools, how do we have safer lives, and how do we respect each other a whole lot more when it's a situation of conflict or bullying and harassment? How do we be an ally? How do we, you know, stand up and do our part in the space? So I don't think this will be our last conversation around this. It's been an ongoing chat for some time. But I just wanted to share, you know, my thoughts around the importance of this conversation. I'm very much looking forward to, and we'll be following what is happening in this space. I would really like to see, you know, more open conversation about who's dealing with these policies. Are they being reviewed? When and how are they being implemented? How are we making sure the right resources are available to teachers, that we do have inclusive, safe environments for all people, and that, you know, if we have programs like Strive that already exist, you know, with the RNC, is that something that can be, you know, extended to rural Newfoundland where the RNC isn't, you know, working in partnership? Can that work in partnership with the RCMP? Where to from here? But I think there's a bigger conversation here, and I just wanted to open it up. And I wanted to make sure that any parent who's saying to their child, and you go back to the days when you and I grew up, and I remember the strap too. I never got it, but I was threatened with it. And I think, you know, it's really important to go back to that lesson learning at home, because when people talk about, you know, when this kid hits you, you hit him harder. At this point, if your child is 12 years old and they hit a child, or I was advised by the RNC, even if they're defending themselves, they can be charged. Do you want a situation, if you're trying to counsel your child to keep themselves safe, to give them advice that could end up where they could be dealing with an RNP file? You don't. So I think we need a lot more education, a lot more awareness, a lot more conversation in a safe, respectful space to try to make a difference around this. And I really do hope that next year when Pink Shirt Day comes around and we're talking about it, because I'll probably be calling about it then too, that we've got a bit of a different narrative. This is a longer term solution in place right now, Patty. But while people are in the, Confederation building in the safety of their office and their boardrooms, there are children that are hiding out in libraries or different spaces because they're afraid to go out in the school community. We need to do better, and we need to do more, and we need to take that action now.
Appreciate the time, Trina.
That's the message I'd like to share. Thank you, Patty. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Final break of the morning. Michael, you're next to talk about homelessness. Don't go away.
This is Open Line on the VOCM Bigland FM radio network.
Welcome back to the program. Let's go line 4. Michael, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. Thanks for taking my call. What I want to mention this morning is sort of connect the 3 dots, remembering, reaching out, and respect. Now, I should tell you, a couple of weeks ago, I was downtown, and I was really pleased with the snow clearing around Water Street and Duckworth. Really pleased. Now, except we did have the War Memorial, the ongoing construction, and I think when that's finished, that will be a good job. But talking about the War Memorial brings me to my first topic about remembering. I think it's very important that we do remember the people who their sacrifices who've gone ahead, for various countries. And with this in mind, I'm thinking of next Monday is April the 1st, not to be confused with April Fool's Day, but it is the Easter Rising commemoration celebrations. And we've had this in Newfoundland for about the last 20 years or so. It's kind of under the radar. It's under the radar. We have it at Colonial Building, and we have this year we've a well-known folk singer, Irish singer of a gentleman called Lee Brockerville from the Burin Peninsula, and he's going to read the proclamation. You're probably familiar with the proclamation that's read out at various ceremonies.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's the highlight of that, and we're sort of going to tie that in with remembering the people who fought in World War I. The Newfoundland Regiment, their sacrifice, and you were talking about bullying. Bullying is everywhere. Think of looking for a ceasefire in Gaza, Ukraine, Burma. What do we do about this? You talk to people and say, well, what can we do? I think it's important that people, come out and show the flag. So we're hoping to get people from the people from the Palestine community, Ukraine community to come out with us as well, and to we talked about remembering. We're reaching out to other groups because we have a lot in common. I think you'd agree with that, Paddy. A lot in common.
Well, I think throughout the different societal issues, we all share more in common than we do differences, but the differences just rise to the top. I'm always unsure why that is. I guess it's how, if it bleeds, it leads. And of course, it's easy enough to be admiring and complimenting and being kind to each other, but it's much more entertaining, apparently, to be unkind and to highlight the differences, of which there are few compared to the likes, which are many.
Yeah, and the last point on that, sort of remembering, reaching out, respect. If we're going to be at Colonial Building, and if there are, people there, tents and so forth, I'd like the people who come along, bring a coffee, bring a donut, reach out, respect for the people who are there. I think that's the least that we can do. You know what I mean? These people are there, and doing something. A lot of times we talk about the problems, and it's important to come out, and for Irish people to come out, we'll see the people doing their diddly-dee music down in Water Street and George Street, and that's okay for half an hour or so, but I think, the history is important, the Irish history, and people, we like to think, we claim we're the most Irish place, in the world, but, it's nice to, show show the flag, show your colours, and again, it's we're making it all inclusive. World War I, Newfoundland Regiment, Gaza, Ukraine, and Burma. So remembering, reaching out, and respect.
In many parts of Africa, in distinct turmoil, it's a world shaping like a tinderbox. Michael, good to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paddy. Thanks for taking the call.
Appreciate your time.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Very likely the final word goes to line number 1. Laura, you're on the air.
Hey, Patty.
Hey there.
How you doing?
Doing great. How about you?
Oh, pretty good. I think we got something in common.
Might that be?
I got the strap in grade 1.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have said it out loud, but I've had one or two.
Oh, well, right? Sometimes stuff was deserved, sometimes it wouldn't. Simple as that.
Yep.
Listen, there's class action lawsuits against the internet, against Meta in the world.
Yeah.
None here. People are not, I don't know if they're aware of it or just choose not to be aware of it, or either way, it's happening. There's class action lawsuits against the internet and those who provide Facebook, Instagram and Snapchat and all of these things, because their algorithms were made in such a way as to addict anybody. The algorithms were made to addict us on purpose. And it's caused mental illness.
Yeah, now there have been some class action lawsuits in this part of the world too. I think Meta offered $50 million to Canadian users as part of a lawsuit that's ongoing. The federal government here, the federal government in the United States and in the UK and different parts of Europe are trying to figure out how to deal with social media platforms, whether it be with the concept of disinformation or misinformation or, even the sharing of content that is inappropriate for children. So I don't think we figured it out. And I guarantee you, I don't have the answer to that particular question, but it's run amok. In concept, social media was just a terrific idea. Is it working as it was initially intended? Probably not.
No. The dark web is proof in the pudding for that. But because there's, if our children are smart enough to outwit us as hackers at 12 and 13 and 14 years old, they're into the dark web as well. So the same one. So it goes. It's an ongoing thing, and it won't stop until the other girl who was saying it needs to stop in our schools. The cell phones don't need to be in a school. The kid, if it needs to contact a parent or a parent needs to contact a child, when you and I were going to school, that's what our parents did.
Yeah, well, there was no such thing as a cell phone.
Right.
But I just think the cell phone in class is more of an issue of being disruptive versus some of the other ills that lie within. But I get the point. And we've got to try and figure out a way to navigate this, because the trends are clear between violence and the decrease in scores in some of the core subjects, all of the things that should be important and try to keep ahead of, we're falling behind. And the trend is real, and it's going to be difficult to buck that trend.
I think there should be in each and every school. They should be able to go in when they enter school and send the bell. When the bell rings, there's a lockbox. Put their phone in it. It gets automatically locked, and when the bell rings at lunchtime, they can have their phone. And when the bell rings, the phone got to go back in the lockbox until the bell rings at the end of school.
Yeah, I've seen some classrooms where they actually have something hanging on the back of the classroom door with different pockets for the children to put their phones in, because sometimes for the delivery of some curriculum, it can be appropriate to use technology.
Oh, absolutely.
So just to have it accessible but not in their hands. I'll give you the final thoughts because we're quickly running out of time.
Yeah, I know.
Would you like to add anything else?
Oh, I got a whole bunch of things I'd like to add, but we haven't got time. But that's okay. Listen, in the 80s, there was a life skill program for the people who don't know any basic life skills, all these kids, aging out of the systems, et cetera, and group homes. There used to be life skill programs. My sister started up and ran one for years.
Okay.
So maybe I'll call you tomorrow.
I look forward to the chat. Thanks for your time.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, pretty good show there today. Big thanks to everyone who supports the program. All of the listeners, callers, emailers, and tweeters. You're all right. We will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning, right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, Fonz King, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.